Hey friends, welcome to Dishing on Divorce on WGSNDB Going Solo Network Radio, Podcasts, and TV. I'm your host, Lisa Lisser, CEO and founder of LZL Coaching, a boutique coaching firm focused on divorce, co-parenting, and mediation support. As a recovering lawyer, a current educator, an author, a mediator, and a spiritual counselor, I'm also a divorce coach who is committed to transforming the divorce experience for everyone involved. Think of me as your guide on the side, emotionally and strategically, and with an eye to your future. You don't have to walk through this mess alone. We'll do it together. So, marriage is about love. Divorce is about money. So often when we are swirling in the emotions of divorce, we leave the money issues for someone else to decide. Maybe your ex was the CFO of your family and you took a back seat. That's okay. No judgment. But now, as you go through the divorce process, it's time for you to take control of your finances. And that can be scary. In my own situation, I was not in charge of the family finances. That was my ex's job. So when it was time to split everything up, I was the novice. I didn't get a financial advisor or any kind of financial support. I just thought my lawyer would take care of that. Much as we believe that the lawyer has all the knowledge, finances are not necessarily their specialty. I should have gotten advice. Had I taken the time to reflect on my financial situation prior to going into mediation, I would have at least felt more secure and confident that I got what I needed. Money is power, and I felt like I had none. And I also felt like I didn't deserve to have that power. Now, that's not a place I want my clients to be in. You have the right and the responsibility to understand your financial future. In fact, my goal is to educate you up for your financial future. And that may be the greatest takeaway I want for my audience. You deserve to know your financial opportunities, and you're entitled to support. And that brings me to today's guest, Kristen Vernace. As a certified financial planner and certified divorce financial analyst, Kristen specializes in helping clients navigate the financial complexities of divorce with clarity and confidence. She brings a compassionate, strategic approach to each stage of the process, whether clients are contemplating divorce, in the midst of it, or adjusting to life afterward. Kristen is passionate about empowering individuals to make informed financial decisions that align with their values and long-term goals. In addition to her divorce planning work, she has deep expertise in budgeting, retirement planning, and tax strategy. Her clients value her ability to provide calm, thoughtful guidance during periods of transition and her commitment to helping them build a stable and fulfilling financial future. Kristen, welcome to Dishing on Divorce.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate being here, and I really enjoyed listening to everything that you just shared because I think it hits the nail on the head when it comes to divorce, expecting attorneys to really understand areas of expertise that aren't their areas of expertise. And so that's where a CDFA comes in, really helping people navigate the finances as they go through the divorce process. So I'm glad to be here and talking about this topic.
Sorry about that.
Lost you for a second.
But we're back. Thank you, Cece, for taking over. All right, Kristen, welcome to Dishing on Divorce. Tell us your story.
I don't even know where to start, but I guess I'll start more recently. So I love finance, I love analysis, and I love solving puzzles, but I didn't always know that this is exactly what I wanted to do with my life. I had started off my career, I got my master's degree in education, and I was actually a middle school teacher for several years. And I loved it. But I found what I really loved was helping other people. And I loved explaining complex topics to others, seeing them learn and grow and having that aha moment. That's what I really loved from the teaching field. So the more I learned about finance, the more I started to get hooked. But the real catalyst was my own parents' divorce after 30 something years of being married. And I won't share their story, but it did entice me to want to look into being a CDFA, figuring out how I can help people navigate through that experience, which can be so traumatic and so emotional, of course, for so many people. So about 10 years ago, I started to make that shift into financial planning. And now as a CDFA and a financial planner, I get to work with clients. I still get to teach them, which, I started off my career doing, but I'm teaching them how to advocate for themselves first and foremost. I'm explaining complicated jargon, that the attorneys and the mediators are sharing. And I'm really helping them to feel like they have a handle on such a rough time in their life and see that light at the end of the tunnel.
That's amazing. And you're someone who I could have so used when I was going through my divorce. And what I find so amazing now is that there really are people whose purpose and passion is walking you through the divorce process. And you come from a space where you lived divorce as the child. And even though you were an adult, it sounds like when it happened, it doesn't change the fact that it impacted your life. And you could see how it impacted your parents and where there was confusion about the finances and what happened next. And that's probably what makes it feel so threatening. Like it's threatening to know, but it's more threatening to not know, because that's the fear. That's why we need education to sort of launch us toward knowledge. And I mean, that sounds like an obvious statement, but sometimes the most obvious things are the last things we see.
I couldn't agree more. I think when you're in that gray area of what is going to happen, which you're knee deep in the entire time you're going through the divorce process, I think that's, like you said, one reason why it is so complicated. Obviously, it's emotional for a lot of reasons, but I think it is hard to articulate the fact that when you don't know what's going to happen, when you don't know what your life is going to look like next month or next year, it can be really exhausting. There's decision fatigue, and there's that uncertainty. Am I going to be in the house that I've been in this whole time? Are my children going to have to change school districts? Am I going to be okay? Am I getting child support, spousal support? Am I owing those things to the other spouse? There's just so many uncertainties that, a divorce coach who's helping through the emotional side of things, the CDFA who's helping navigate the analysis of the assets and the liabilities and saying, you will be okay. You can afford to rent this new place if that's what you so choose. But having somebody who's helping you understand what your financial picture might look like in the future, I mean, you really can't put a price on that because it's peace of mind, right?
Yeah. It's peace of mind, but it's also a light at the end of the tunnel, right? Because so often people are struck in the divorce world without knowing what's supposed to happen afterwards. They got married. They thought it was for better or for worse forever. And so there's no next chapter. That wasn't in their heads. Even people who are the ones who choose it, they really don't know what's next. And so having a financial advisor on board, especially someone who's looking at it through a divorce lens, because there are fine financial advisors out there who want to help you. But if they're not really looking at it with a good knowledge of what it means to go through divorce, what are the tax ramifications, what is a quadro, how do we use this new vocabulary, and then what kinds of tools does a person going through divorce need that may be different than someone else?
Absolutely. And in fact, this week alone, I've talked with two different financial planners, both of whom asked me, how does it work to go through a divorce? One asked, in New Hampshire, how does it work with child support and how does it work with spousal support? And again, this is a certified financial planner, but divorce is not their area of expertise. So not knowing how the courts make decisions, not knowing the difference between a litigious divorce versus a collaborative divorce, that's not their area of expertise. And so I was happy to help answer those questions. And then I talked to another planner today who said she's working with these clients and they're navigating a divorce and she just feels in over her head, again, because it's a niche. And without that CDFA background, without having studied it, taken the exam, and then implemented it and helped different clients and worked with different attorneys and mediators, there's really a lack of knowledge sometimes, or I should say gaps, where
Right.
there's a fair amount of financial planning, of course, that's able to happen with a financial advisor, but the CDFA is really adding that element of, yeah, that's typically how it goes, but actually there's one-off situations. Let me tell you about the last case I worked, or I've actually seen a judge decree X and Y. So really bringing that expertise fills those gaps that a traditional financial advisor tends to have, just because, this isn't the area that they focus on.
Right. And what would you say is the gap that you've seen attorneys have when attorneys are just, oh my, when attorneys are advising clients, they're like, equitable distribution means you'd split the baby. Like, is that really what it has to mean? And what is your experience there?
Yeah, I'll start by saying I am not an attorney. I could not be an attorney. They are, of course, skilled professionals, but their wheelhouse just simply, it's different from what I do. So I have seen attorneys negotiate in a way that was very strategic, and I wonder if I would be able to do that, right? That's not my wheelhouse. But attorneys, especially those working in family law, because some of them have been doing this for so long, they think that their experience alone will carry them through the next case and the next and the next, when they don't actually have the education behind it. So I'll give you an example of something that recently occurred. I was talking to an attorney, and I'll try to keep this, pretty simple, but a couple was divorcing, and one spouse was going to owe spousal support to the other. So the husband was going to have to pay the wife for a few years. The attorney suggested that they take out a life insurance policy on the husband. So in case he passed away, the life insurance would pay out to the wife. She'd be losing spousal support, but she'd get the life insurance payout. Now that can be a great idea, but the couple was 75 years old. So this is not at all a good strategy. This is not what you want to do. In case you're not sure, those of you listening, if you're 75 years old and you're obtaining a life insurance policy, it's going to be incredibly expensive, because the insurance carrier is taking that risk that you're going to outlive the policy if it's a term policy. And so anyway, it just wasn't a great strategy. And I knew that right off the bat. But the attorney had used life insurance as a risk mitigator in the past, and had done it with a younger couple, and didn't know how to apply or change or modify the strategy for an older couple. So that's just one example of, they have some experience with the financial side of divorce. But again, just like with a traditional financial advisor, there are gaps if they don't have that full education of being a certified divorce financial analyst.
Yeah. That's such an important story, because first it sounds like, of course, a life insurance policy would definitely work to cover, years of alimony if, God forbid, something happened, but not if you're 75 years old. Like, at that point, you have to look at the people in front of you. And I think that you're right. Sometimes there are blinders that are sort of there for attorneys because they think that every case has similar dimensions. I'm not going to say that all attorneys or anything like that, but often you think you're an expert, and so you do things a certain way, and that's worked for you in the past, so it should work for you in the future. But every family is different, and that's why having a specific CDFA on your team is essential, I think, to building the right divorce settlement. Because I encourage everyone to go to mediation and settle, no matter what the circumstances, unless there is like physical abuse. But even with a narcissist, you can negotiate a settlement. You just have to be armed with education. You have to educate up. So let me ask you, what do you think is the biggest obstacle that people going through divorce face when they start thinking about money and their future?
Oh, that's a great question. I think perhaps the biggest issue is emotions are already high as people are going through a divorce. And when emotions stay high during the decision-making parts of the divorce, that's where people can run into trouble. So for example, saying that, there's so many individuals who say, I want the house, right? I want the family home in the divorce process. And sometimes that's a great plan and it makes perfect sense, but sometimes it does not. And so using that heightened emotional state to get the house, instead of pausing for a moment and saying, analyzing underneath, why do I want the house? Is it because I don't want to disrupt my children's lives? Is it because I want to stay in the school district? Am I being petty and I just want the house to get back at the other spouse? So sometimes that digging deep doesn't always occur. It's just that heightened impulsive emotional state that can really be a barrier. And then the other thing that gets in the way is something you mentioned earlier. It's that inability to see into the future. And I do understand decision fatigue throughout the divorce process, but I've also had clients who come to me and they say, we're halfway through or we've had a temporary hearing. Here's where we are. And they say things like, I've obtained a rental property. I'm renting now and I can't really afford it right now, but I'll deal with that later. So again, that not being able to look forward and see the long term, it can really affect things negatively because then, there's a deficit every month in their cash flow, or credit card debt becomes prevalent because they didn't have enough to pay the rent. So those sorts of emotional hindrances or inability to see the long term, those are absolutely the biggest obstacles that I've seen.
Yeah, that's huge. That's huge because they didn't think that they had to see the long term before. And it's scary to have to plan for your future. So many people are stuck in I'm not going to think about that today. I'll think about it tomorrow. And, a little Scarlett O'Hara from Gone with the Wind. I'll think about it tomorrow.
Yes. And then at the end, Scarlett regretted it, right?
Exactly. But the thing is that they're so afraid. They're so afraid. They're afraid of the unknown. They're afraid of their future. So how do you help them alleviate their fear?
Yeah. So one thing that I do when I'm working with clients is I'm always looking forward and I'm always proactively planning. So yes, we're working towards a divorce settlement, but my job really is to say, how will that settlement impact them after the divorce is finalized? So we create a budget together, which, we start that through the financial affidavit process, which is a term that's used as people are navigating the divorce proceedings. But we really try to fine tune that budget or that spending plan well ahead of time so that they're not relying on last minute decision making once the divorce is finalized. So I help them by looking ahead. We plan out their budget and make sure that the cash that's coming in from support, from their own income, from assets, that will carry them through and maintain a lifestyle that's reasonable for them. And then I also help them just to understand that while tweaks might be needed for their lifestyle, they might not be living the exact same lifestyle. Ultimately, that's probably for the best, right? They're making a change. They've signed on to go through with this divorce. So something is going to change in their life. But we try to look at that through a positive lens of,
Right.
you're not living the same life. You are making changes and we can make tweaks to your financial picture. And it doesn't mean that you're starting over. It doesn't mean you're starting from scratch. It means we're modifying so that your financial picture matches the future that you see for yourself in your new lifestyle.
Great. So that's a good place for us to pause. It's time for our 30-second break to hear from our sponsor, and we will be back with Kristen Vernace. And we're back with Kristen Vernace, CDFA and financial planner. Kristen is a huge asset to someone going through divorce. And I have to say, your demeanor is so approachable and kind. And so often people have so many fears of who can they trust that they need to find someone they can build a relationship with. And so how do you build that relationship, especially when it looks like they're not going to be able to live to exactly the same level they did before? How do you give them bad news but in a way that lets them see the positive?
Yeah, it can be tricky, but one thing that I have going for me is I am just a positive person. I love life. I love my job, and so it's pretty easy for me to look on the positive side of things. And I naturally am guiding my clients to try to view things the same way that I am. It can be hard to give news of, you're not going to get the alimony amount that you maybe hoped for. We're going to have to cut costs. But what I like to do is going through cash flow, which some people call a budget, but I think that's scary. So I say cash flow. But going through their cash flow, we look at things through an analytical lens. So again, just trying to take the emotion out of these decisions. So we look at their needs, their wants, and their saving for the future. And we look and say, okay, what areas are causing you joy, bringing joy into your life, and what areas are not? So for example, car insurance does not bring joy into a lot of people's lives. So an easy thing that I talk to my clients about is, well, shop around, shop with different companies, and perhaps you can lower that bill and keep, the same essential policy in place. So I'm helping them through every line in their cash flow of, okay, does it make sense to keep the travel amount the same? Well, if that's their passion, we're going to do everything we can to not touch that bucket. So I'm not somebody who comes in and says, stop eating out, stop seeing your friends, stop spending money in this regard. That's not my role. My role is to say, we're navigating towards a new future. What are your priorities? What is bringing you joy? And let's make sure we maintain that in your plan. And the areas where we all spend in a way that's like, oops, why did I buy that? I've never worn it. That's what we're trying to trim down. And it's client driven. So they are saying, this isn't really as fulfilling as I thought it might be. I'm okay to cut that out. And so that's how we navigate those tough decisions and those tough conversations.
So really what you're saying is you help them see there's what I want, and then there's what I want more. That's how I speak to clients when we're really like framing out. Before, I don't give them the financial advice, but I help them think about what to ask for based on what's really important. So what's important, but what's more important? And that gives them some room to sort of really evaluate their own values, the life that they want to live, who they want to show up as. And that's a big piece of it, because you said earlier that, sometimes it's not such a bad thing if you don't have as much money to spend. Now, a lot of people would have a difficult time understanding that. But the fact is, when you actually have a handle on your finances, you have so much more power and you're so much more in control. And once you start recognizing that, like, I can pay for the electric and the water and the sewer and my mortgage and the taxes, and I can do it myself. I don't have to rely on someone else. Like, that empowerment shifts people. And that's really what you're doing. You're helping them see it in concrete terms by actually zoning into their financial picture. In New Jersey, we call that financial affidavit a CIS, a confidential confidential information statement. Confidential isn't the first word, but I'll think about it. But it's the CIS, the case information statement. So that's what gives both the budget/cash flow and the assets and liabilities, so that you have everything in one place, or the court has everything in one place. But when we think about cash flow, we're also looking at where are our priorities, and really taking time to assess that, maybe something they've never done before. So I love that you help them walk through it. You say that you help them create a spending plan before the divorce is finalized. What happens when you get the client and their divorce is already done?
That's, yeah, that, well, sometimes it's a great situation and sometimes it's not. I have had clients who have engaged me after the fact, and there's, everything's been signed. The final hearing has taken place, or whatever avenue they took, it's done, it's set in stone. So in those cases, what do? We make the best of whatever situation they have. They agree to the settlement for some reason. Either they really just wanted it to be over, which I can understand and respect, or there was something that they were receiving that was very important to them emotionally, financially, etc. So I asked them, okay, what was it about this settlement that you were willing to sign off on, that you were okay with? And then we focus on that, because that is the positive that is going to carry us through. And then we just get pretty creative. So as a certified financial planner, I'm looking at all aspects of their financial picture. So sometimes we'll do tax strategy and tax planning. Sometimes we'll be able to do something with their retirement planning that they hadn't previously thought of. So it's really my job to take them where they are, where they're starting, and say, okay, where do we want to go, right? What does the retirement horizon look like? When do you want to retire if you're not already? What are your priorities? Do you have family? Do you have children? What is really empowering you and motivating you to keep going with this new financial picture? And that's what we focus on. And we work towards those short and long-term goals.
That's great. That's great, because what you're doing is you're helping them prioritize and recognize that, there are values that they believe in, that they want to live forward into. So like, what are the values they want to model for their kids and their lives? And what are the values that they want to infuse? So these are really important guidelines. And when you're in the throes of the divorce, or in the worry after divorce, if you find out that actually what you negotiated is not going to meet your needs, then it's really hard to make decisions. So having a support there, a professional like you, is going to make all the difference in moving forward.
I do agree. And I also really like what you said about helping people figure out what do they want, but what do they want more? Because sometimes I work with a client who the divorce is finalized and they really want something, right? They want to keep the house, or they want to pay for their children's college education, and if they tell me that is their number one priority, and they're willing to sacrifice other things, they're willing to work more years, they're willing to cut back on other expenses, we can almost always find a way to make things work if they're willing to sacrifice in other aspects. But if they tell me, yeah, I really wanted to pay for my kids' education, but it's not worth me working 5 more years and getting rid of the house and this and that and the other, then that's illuminating, not just for me as their planner and their support system, but it's illuminating for them that they thought they wanted that one thing, but they don't want it more than X, Y, and Z. So it's really beneficial to get a sense of their priorities and almost a ranking of their priorities,
right,
so that we can target them in order.
That's huge, because having people prioritize is something that's scary to do, because they think everything is important right now. But being able to say, okay, let's take a moment, let's really consider what's the impact of each one of these things on the rest of your life. And so it's thinking about the present, but it's future forward. So that's really important. You talked about college, right? And paying for college. So that's a big thing. Like, what if you get a client who's finished negotiating the deal, but the deal didn't say anything about college? How do you support that person?
If I had been working with them throughout the divorce process, I of course would have encouraged them to have the parenting plan or the settlement include that topic, because it's a big one. But if it has not been addressed, there's nothing in writing that's been agreed upon. My first my first step is to see, is there an amicable working relationship between the parents? I'm a big proponent of parents who are divorced. If it's safe for them to meet once a year, it could be a phone call, it could be a video chat, but meet once a year and talk about upcoming expenses and come up with a game plan for anything not explicitly listed out in the parenting plan. So college would be, of course, number one on that list. So it can be tricky, right? When one parent is willing to pay for college or another major expense for the kids and the other is not. But again, it's almost a negotiation tactic if, again, there's a safe working relationship there. So I've seen a lot of flexibility between two individuals trying to come to an agreement. And this is just another instance where they can do so.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. That's great. What would you say to someone who feels overwhelmed or intimidated by managing their money on their own for the first time?
I would say you're not alone. So let that at least be a source of comfort. Almost everybody who is a career shifter, someone who's divorced, any major change in their life, you're going to feel out of your element. But what I would say is start using some resources. So listen to this podcast, for example, start to get your feet on the ground and feel like you know your next steps moving forward. Work with a financial advisor. So I offer 1-hour sessions. So you don't have to commit to this years and years long relationship. You can pick my brain for an hour or two and again, get your feet on the ground. There's also great apps. I'm a huge proponent of Monarch Money. I'm not paid to say that. I just really like it. It's a budgeting app and people can have it on their phone and the computer. And once you have your budget from your financial affidavit or your CIS, or from working with a planner, you input the budget onto the app and it tracks your spending throughout the month. So you get a sense of, oof, I'm spending more on groceries than I anticipated, or, I have a little bit more to spend on shopping. Let me go out to the mall. So it's a great way to keep track of your spending. So long story short, there is help everywhere. You just have to be comfortable enough to say, I do need support. I do need help, and then go out and seek it.
That's amazing. So let's end with what's one mindset shift that really helps people take control of their finances during this transition?
I would say, and we've said it before, but I do think this is the number one takeaway, so I'm glad to end with it. Shifting your thinking from a short-term reaction, that impulsive short-term decision-making, to long-term intention. What are your intentions long-term for yourself as an individual, as a happy person, and with your finances? And the more you can look long-term, the easier it is to make decisions now that are going to be healthy and helpful to you.
Amazing. Amazing. That's great. Thank you so much. This has been so much fun. Sorry for the blip at the beginning, but we are back and we had a great conversation. Please tell my audience how they can find you.
Sure. So I run Pathways Financial Planning. So the website is pathwaysfp.com, Pathways Financial Planning. And my email is on the website, but it's Kristen@pathwaysfp.com.
And it's Kristen, Kristen.
Yes, thank you for clarifying.
Sure. So great to have you. I hope that my audience reaches out. My audience can always reach me, Lisa, at lzlcoaching.com. I offer free 30-minute discovery sessions, and I look forward to hearing from you. And I want you to be empowered. Educate yourself up. Thanks so much. And we'll see you next time.